Once upon a time, in the heart of the Bronx during the crack epidemic, the streets told stories no one wanted to hear. Rows of abandoned buildings stood like hollow skeletons, their windows smashed and walls scarred with graffiti. People avoided these places, hurrying past with their heads down. For most, they were just lost spaces, ruled by gangs, thugs, and despair. But not for Mr. Rossmann. Mr. Rossmann was an older man, unemployed, and struggling like so many others in the harsh economic climate. He lived in a small, dimly lit apartment with peeling wallpaper and a broken radiator. Yet, even with so little, he carried an air of quiet dignity. Where others saw a wasteland, he saw potential. "It's still home," he would mutter to himself as he walked past the crumbling buildings. And home deserves better. One day, with nothing but a toolbox and a worn-out jacket, Mr. Rossmann stepped into one of the abandoned buildings. The air inside was heavy with dust and neglect. Broken glass crunched under his boots as he surveyed the wreckage. Broken furniture, discarded needles, and graffiti-covered walls. Undeterred, he began to work, slowly but steadily. He repaired door hinges, patched up walls, and cleared the debris. His hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with purpose. At first, people didn't notice. But then the younger gang members who hung around the block like shadows began to take interest. "What's the old man doing?" one of them asked, watching from the corner. "Fixing stuff," another replied with a laugh. "Crazy old fool." But curiosity got the better of them. One by one, they began to wander into the building, watching as Mr. Rossmann worked. He didn't shoo them away. Instead, he handed them tools. "Here," he said to a boy with a scowl that didn't quite hide his youth. "You ever used a hammer before?" The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "Time to learn," Mr. Rossmann said, his tone calm and firm. Day after day, they returned. He taught them how to sand wood, fix broken windows, and paint walls. At first, they mocked him. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. The gang members found a sense of pride in the work. They started calling him Mr. R, a term of respect that none of them could quite explain. One evening, as Mr. Rossmann walked home through the dimly lit streets, he noticed a group of 5 young men standing under a flickering street lamp. They were the type people crossed the street to avoid. Tough, silent, their faces shadowed by hoodies. Mr. Rossmann adjusted his worn jacket and walked on. He knew he couldn't avoid them, and a pang of fear tightened his chest. What could he do if they decided to jump him? As he drew closer, the tension was palpable. The air felt heavy, like the moments before a storm. One of the men stepped forward, his stance aggressive. But before anything could happen, another voice broke the silence. "That's Mr. Rossmann," one of the young men said, his tone quiet but firm. "He's good." The others nodded, their stances relaxing. Mr. Rossmann walked past them with a slight nod, his heart pounding, but his stride steady. In the weeks that followed, the buildings continued to transform, one by one. The young men who had once been feared were now seen carrying tools, repairing walls, and laughing together. They weren't perfect. There were still struggles, still moments of tension. But something had changed. And though the Bronx remained a hard place, Mr. Rossmann's corner of it shone a little brighter. We can't always change the world, but we can choose to clean up our corner of it. The end.